Hi, good morning everybody. Welcome to our virtual panel session today as we discuss building a secure, sustainable IT stack for remote working by Inspired Media and in partnership with Dropbox. So my name is Graham Howard. I'm the CTIO of Cavea Insurance, and I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion today as we talk through the various different elements of working from home and how to build out actual IT stack and some of the experiences some of the leaders have experienced over the last few months. I'm sure we can all relate to the new reality of remote working that's been thrust upon us and how the last 6 or 7 months have really shaped how we move through operations and how some of our digital transformations have been transformed. So there's many different views about whether or not COVID-19 has been a bigger help to digital transformations than a standard board and a CIO can do. But yeah, we'll get into the details of that. I'm joined today by the 5 panelists, or 4 of the panelists, a very broad set of knowledge and different verticals that they represent. We're going to talk about how we've adapted and pivoted to keep our businesses running and keep people productive as we move into a different world. I must admit, I've been in my role now at Cavea for 18 months. I think I was quite lucky really to have just over a year under my belt before the changes made. We'll talk to one of our panelists later, Andreas, who didn't have his first day. In fact, was the first day of lockdown. So massively different set of parameters, and I can only assume that must be a very different methodology than I managed to implement. But I would say there's, I was lucky that I managed to get quite a cultural shift within my department. So we were very much of a can-do attitude when we went into lockdown, and I really think that is one of the big enablers that helped us move, and really the ability to fix things on the fly, because you didn't have time to plan, you had to react. I think that's definitely been a real benefit to me and our organisation to help us move forward. Without further ado, I shall introduce the rest of the panel, starting with Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Carter. I'm the IT director at Together Financial Services. So we're a mid-size specialist lender. I've been there for 6.5 years.
Thank you, Simon. Andreas?
Hello, I'm Andreas Galados. I'm the Chief Technology Innovation Officer for Bark and Dagenham College. And as you mentioned already, Graham, first day of the new job on the first day of the lockdown. So just a bit over 6 months there. Quite interesting beginning of a new job, the new role.
Fantastic. And Mannix?
Hi folks, Mannix Ryan is my name. I am the country manager for the UK for Dropbox and HelloSign. Dropbox has been in the UK for the last 10 years. I look after the Dropbox business side of the business, and we acquired HelloSign about 2 years ago, which would operate in the e-signature space. We would work with a very diverse range of companies in the UK, from the BBC, where we have a wall-to-wall global deployment. A lot of the big research and universities as well, the likes of the University College London, Manchester University, Cambridge University, and the Dementia Research Institute. So I'm very interested to hear the panel's views on how they've managed to secure their environment while their whole world has been turned upside down.
Excellent, thank you. And then finally, can I introduce Peter? You're on mute, Peter.
Yes, it's a standard error. Good morning. Sorry I'm a little bit late. A few snafus with the link. It was in my junk folder for some reason. I have to get the thing released. So glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. So I think just typifies pretty much every call, doesn't it? At some point, you're on mute, can't join. I've got an issue. No matter how many times you practice, it never seems to get any better.
For a living, and I give it to other people. You wouldn't believe how embarrassing it is to find why is it not working for me, and I need to use it.
It's always the way, isn't it? Pretty much guaranteed. So first we'll kick off. We've got a number of questions to get through, but equally we have a Q&A facility. So if people have got questions, I will be keeping my eye on them, and we'll try and insert questions if they're relevant. But we do have a Q&A session at the end of the after this panel discussion. So if people want to wait for questions later, then that's fine as well. Perfect. Okay. So the first question we want to sort of dive into is, what is the biggest barrier you have faced in your IT stack since lockdown began? So for me personally, I mean, we have a number of different contact centres throughout the UK, and up until the 1st of March, there was no ability for those contact centres to work from home. So they had to come in. We had no other ability to do anything. And then by the 14th of March, we had 98% of our workforce operating from home with telephony, remote VDI, and really moved forward with in a whole brave new world that we've been trying to do for a number of years. So I think our biggest barrier in our stack, from my perspective, was more about how we approach the problem rather than the problem itself. We had lots of issues on trying to move ourselves forward at different parts of the stack. We had lots of issues with just getting people to operate in a different way. But I think our biggest success was around just how we motivated the people to move forward and how we really drove our stack. I know, Simon, you give me a view of what happened for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we'd made some strategic investments, you know, kind of in the past, clearly not foreseen what was going to happen, but things like cloud telephony and our kind of thin client architecture, which really, really helped. So we were able from day one to get the whole business working remotely. The biggest challenge actually was getting laptops out. So we kind of heard about COVID in December, I think it was, as a kind of Chinese thing, and we just thought, oh, it's going to impact our supply chain potentially, this. And in fact, you know, at the very start that was happening. So we'd accelerated the rollout of desktops and kept the old stock. So we had this big logistical exercise of kind of getting this kit out to contact center users, typically who you know, didn't have laptops, and then actually just working out who actually had a home laptop that was usable, you know, that they could remote desktop in, and that we'd be comfortable with that. So you know, it was a pretty frantic, well, for everyone, pretty frantic couple of weeks, kind of getting us to that point. I think the big gap for us has been collaboration software. So, you know, we've always been a very office-based business. It's an HQ where 90% of the people work. There'd absolutely been no demand for, you know, things like Teams. And like everybody else, we then started to roll Teams out rapidly, but trying to balance it with some good practice and some good security practice. So, but I would still say effective usage is patchy just because of the culture. You know, that culture hasn't really shifted so much. So in IT, we love it, we use it all the time, you know, there's certain other of the knowledge workers who are similar, but equally quite large swathes of the company that I think still need to get up to speed with the potential of what it can do.
Yeah, excellent. So I definitely empathise with quite a few of those different issues as well. Andreas, I think you've got a different user base. Can you give us your view on that?
Yes, a bit more, quite different, to be honest. As college user and education was always fixated on being physically somewhere. If you're not physical there, it's impossible to operate. It's possible to deliver any course. So, as I said, first day on the new job, and we had to issue over close to 2,000 laptops. So we have to try to find from all the different buildings that we have any laptop in classroom, package it quickly, make sure that you keep a record, because there was no inventory as of, you know, loaning inventory, and try to bring every teacher, staff, and student up to speed with the technology. So that was a complete, and also at the same time, try to migrate into as much cloud as possible at the same time. So like Google Classroom, for example, was one of the big things that we had to, although it existed in the college, no one ever used it proactively. So it came up with quite a few challenges on day one when you have the lockdown to make sure that everyone has internet access, because we are the college is one of the most deprived areas of London, so a lot of the students would not have internet access to access the mobile, the online lesson. So how do you make sure that all your stuff is up to speed, all your students have access to devices and internet, and try to roll this out almost immediately, which was one of the biggest challenges that we had faced. And now we're trying to prepare for the wave 2, taking into consideration all of this while we try to create a more remote experience of teaching in the classroom. So it's quite a bit of a challenge to do when you haven't dealt with something like that before. So quite interesting also at the same time.
Excellent, thank you. And yeah, it's a very different a different set of solutions to the same problem, which fascinating. But and then Peter, yet again a completely different set of solutions, no doubt. Can you give us a view from your world, please?
I think it mirrors some of what's already been said. We had almost 3 work we'd done previously, get the organisation to the cloud and to mobilise and flex our infrastructure so it was in a place where it could cope with our business growth plans, meant we were preempting the problem. I took a view in February that there's a train crash coming almost, and I ordered my laptops for the year and got them in stock. And as a consequence, we had the kit almost the week we needed it. At scale, the challenge then was getting them built and getting them deployed out to half the workforce and getting them all working, get half the workforce working from home. So not perhaps the same scale challenge, but as a percentage of our business, 50% plus of the staff work in offices. They can only do the job from the offices because they use a desktop and they don't use a mobile phone. They don't have a corporate device. So we had to sort of mobilize the entire workforce. And then we had to change our business model. That being a house builder, we were very quickly shut down. Our retail position was shut down, and our product creation was shut down by the nature of the lockdown. So we had to virtualize our entire sales channel and customer services channel, and then park the bus almost, as we were not allowed to physically finish product. So if you had bought a house, you couldn't physically get it finished. If we were 2 weeks from finishing, all we needed was effectively the cleaning and the official release from NHBC. Couldn't get those jobs done, so you weren't getting your home. So we have to sort of address that issue. But lots of challenges around how we engage with customers. We moved away from customers would walk in randomly, as you do. You want to look at new houses, you go out and look at the show homes, you have a walk around the product, you get a feel for things, you go home and think about it. Can't do any of that currently. It's all done via appointment now, but we had to shift to an appointment-based attendance because we have to have a very clear cleaning regime to facilitate access to the properties. And that meant virtualizing the entire sales process and changing our way of working for people who, with the best will in the world, are aged between 21 and 71. With years of experience in working with people and working with your new home and dealing with that aspect of it. Try to do all that digitally, virtually through meeting rooms like this. A huge challenge of culture and behaviours to address, but one that continues to this day.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's far from done, isn't it? I think, and watching the news over the last few weeks, it's definitely the progress we made probably was going to stand us in good stead, isn't it? So definitely interesting view. Manix, do you want to give us a Dropbox view about that?
Yeah, Peter, I empathise with your customers. I'm in the process of buying a house, so it's a new build as well. So it was a couple of weeks from being completed when we went into lockdown. But it strikes me that there's different phases to what's happened. So the first phase, just from listening to guys, seems to be all about logistics. How many laptops do we have? Where are they? Who owns them? Who are they assigned to? And then there was the communications phase. So you see all the rise of Zoom and Slack. I think if you polled an audience and asked them, did anyone know what Zoom was this time last year? It might hover around 2 or 3%, and now it's a verb. So from a Dropbox perspective, in terms of we have 3,000 staff globally, if we couldn't move overnight, nobody could. So from our own people perspective, we were set up to do it. But we've had some really interesting stories with customers. Probably the most interesting one is Osborne Publishing in the UK, who anybody with children will recognise the books. They're a fantastic family business in the UK. They employ about 300 people. They had a 2-year roadmap plan to move everybody, into Office 365 and move off legacy servers, move off things like SharePoint. And that all had to be done in 5 days back in March. So we did a really, really great piece of work. They have a lot of creative people. They have a lot of diverse softwares. So they have design people, they have creatives, they have things like the Adobe suite. And we moved the team virtually. And it wasn't so much for us, it's not so much about the logistics, but it's about the way the individuals and the people work, not just on their own in their spare rooms where we all live, but as teams. How that creative process, how do you move those people and the more human element and allow them to do their work when they can't just grab a coffee or have a catch up in a meeting. So that's what we found. So our customers, the customers who we really deployed well with us and were set up well, we had some really great results and some really cool stories. But the big transformation one was probably Osborne Publishing. They're up and running, no problems. It's great.
Excellent, thank you. It's a nice story to hear some sort of creativity and positivity coming out, some of the diversity, which is always nice to hear. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question. Looking at a slightly different view on this, but what did you do in preparation for any security issues that may have arisen as a result of working remotely? I know for a fact that, as I said, we removed a lot of our staff from working in contact centres, working in the office, to working remotely. So we had to do a lot around enhancing and buying more licenses for VPN. Our firewall capacity had to be increased. We had to do a lot of that work, which, as I'm sure most of you are aware, that's not all of those things that take more than a couple of minutes to set up and install. So we did a lot of work to move to multi-factor authentication on some of the applications that were, I guess, less core to our critical to our business, but critical to our employees. And Slack was one of those tools that we moved to multi-factor authentication to ensure that we try to get people talking. I remember a great story where we had our CISO was working with one of the ladies from the contact center. And we couldn't really understand why she wasn't able to get the two-factor authentication working properly, until we realised that the only mobile phone she had was a very old Nokia phone that she used just for emergency calls only. No smartphone, no normal contract. It's just this revelation of someone who desperately wanted Slack because they wanted that communication, they wanted that ability to talk to people, and were happy to go through the security, but just had no idea what they actually had to do. So really kind of a great example, I think, of where people want to be engaged, but just really had to struggle to try and get around it. But 2 hours later, a few changes in a daughter's smartphone, we had it all up and running, and she was connected again, and we were moving forward. So I think there's some interesting parts around security, and you're trying to ensure that you're safe, but it doesn't always mean that you can't be flexible, I suppose, on some areas. So, I don't know, Andreas, do you want to give us your view on that and your experience?
Yeah, it's very close to you, Graham, to be honest, that when we moved remotely, as I said, most of the facilities were in-house. So if you wanted access to data, you had to go literally in the college physically. So to access any servers. So moving, it was a bit of some of the things that we did was making the decision of what can be accessible outside of the college and what was not necessary in order for the college to run to be accessible. One of our biggest challenges, what we had to work very hard around, was not about security on the data side, it was more about security on the safeguarding. So when you have a Google Classroom, for example, one of the biggest issues that we had with Google was anyone who has the link can access a classroom. And that caused some safeguarding issues, which we had to work quite hard around. And as quite a few colleges had several attacks on the last few months, cyber attacks, also controlling the safeguarding and putting the right processes in place was one of the biggest challenges that we had to face. And by no stretch of imagination, we're perfect on that, but we're still working to try to change it and make it safer, especially for the online classrooms, and especially for, I work on different industries. When you're working on education, you don't have adults, you don't deal with adults, the whole safeguarding, it has to go a step further than what you have, for example, in insurance world, or, when you're dealing with, even if you, and I don't advocate that, but even if you lose some of the data, personal data of an adult, is slightly more digestible, if I can compare to saying that for a 14-year-old they lost their health data. That's where things are going to be like, yes, that's not how we work. So yeah, some challenges there to address, and that's some of the hard decisions which makes some of the people their jobs slightly harder, but we have to do it. So yes, that's very interesting times, especially on the security side.
Thank you, Andres. Simon, how about your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things. I mean, we were obviously increasing the capacity of the remote gateways, so we had to have a lot of focus on that. We were shifting, we have been shifting a lot of the priorities for cyber as well towards more kind of securing remote. So in terms of ingesting logs into Splunk, we kind of had a big focus on kind of anything that was around remote working, applications that were being accessed. One of the big things for us was that a lot of the people were coming in on their own devices using thin client. So we wanted to make sure there was some basic kind of security on their devices. So to do a lot of communication around what good antivirus software was for them to be implementing, that they had to apply the latest patches, and just I think generally communication was a big thing. We had seen an increase in spear phishing, kind of connected with this. So we were continuing the kind of big push on comms around that. Kind of then shifting into, okay, we've provided the capacity on the gateways. What about the resiliency on the gateways? And making sure that we were kind of making that happen as well. So it was, I think, a shifting focus, shifting priorities, and just kind of a lot of it was communication, some of the softer things, as well as the as well as some of the technical stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, I think a lot of that resonates as well, Simon.
Yeah.
Peter, how did you experience things?
I think in twofold. We had to enable the infrastructure to carry everybody working remotely, because clearly we geared up for a degree of remote working, as most people are, but we pretty much moved everybody online and moved everybody's ability to connect by being very courageous around some of the use of technology. So I think we adopted technology at a rate perhaps would have been unacceptable in any other guise. And that allowed us to deploy a VPN environment and options around VPN to get everybody online somehow and into a secure gateway access point. The second thing we did was very much around communication, because where you had an office experience, have you seen this email? This looks a bit iffy, what do you think? And the natural dialogue of people just self-checking with their peers and their friends.
Yeah.
That all goes away when everyone's sat remote to everybody else. They look at it with slightly less guard. So we went through an exercise where we are continually reminding and reminding people about the nature of the links they're getting, the nature of emails they're getting. If it looks suspicious, treat it like it is, almost being more reserved than they would otherwise be, to get around the fact that they're not having that in-room dialogue. We can't quickly get a message out to everybody saying that email's crap. We've also taken more steps to police emails out of the system. So if we spot something, we delete it at root now, whereas we would have, we use other measures, and if you're in the room and you all get told, so people ignore it, we actually pre-cleanse identified nonsense going through the servers. We remove messages out of the system. So even if you get a link in, we don't wait for everybody to see it and then to make their own judgment. police some of that out on a identified needs basis, which is difficult because you have also the privacy issues around people's emails and so on. So we have an executive, got the executive to agree that where we identify a spurious message, we can remove it, and to jump on those things quickly. So it's made us more vigilant and more active in monitoring the environment and ensuring people are sensible. We've done all the good things about reminding people about password resets and driving complex passwords and deriving multi-factor authentication to all of our systems, and rolling out MFA in days rather than months. It's proved a challenge, but there is that element of reinforcing people's common sense and degree of concern. That's probably where most of our focus has been. But it's one of those as it evolves, we have to keep reminding people that they've been told, so that we keep it fresh in their mind that there is this challenge externally. People are trying to exploit the situation, exploit the vulnerabilities, the segregation of individuals. They're trying to exploit that all the time, and they are extremely clever and got to be extremely wary and not do stupid things. So that's the other challenge. To remind them stupid things like having your password set as Mother1 because it's January is not really useful. We enforce a lot of that block password restrictions and some of the things you wouldn't believe. So maybe we've also done some auditing to make sure that we aren't exposed by people being jaded by the whole experience, because there's an awful lot of mental health stress and anxiety caused by the situation that people aren't always fully cognizant of. That sometimes their guard comes down just because they're tired from the constant run rate of all of the stuff going on and the news and everything else. So it remains an ever-present challenge and threat. But I have a lot of people who don't normally work from home at home all the time with no potential return to the office, and so they lose that sort of that house mentality of everyone's spotted it. We've all laughed about the email that says it looks. Just reminding people of all that good practice. This is the challenge.
Definitely, we can definitely see sort of things dropping off because people just aren't used to it. It's just that continual grind, and as you said, something you wouldn't normally just see and think, well, I wouldn't click that. It's the 10th email. You've sat in your home office for the 100th day in a row. You're just going to lose common sense.
We've seen that people have. I was expecting a thing, and I clicked on it because everything's been delivered remotely. I'm not getting, and they're suddenly. So we have to remind people that there's somebody gets hold of an email address and they spam it, and if they get a response, they spam the ones you respond to. So it's it does become an ever-present sort of keep you focused on all the things all the time. But we have to be mindful of that whole. We've been doing this 6 months plus, and it's barely lifted the foot off the gas, and all of a sudden they're now having the foot reapplied to the brake. So dealing with people just being a bit jaded by the constantly double checking everything. Why can't I trust the email from my friend? Because it might not be your friend, no matter what the email says. Yeah, but it is my friend. It's not your. Doesn't just because it's your friend doesn't mean it is actually from your friend. And I'm showing them that I can write an email as your friend. It took me all of 20 seconds in a room on an exec call. So here's how easy it is to spam it, and I'm not an expert at this. I've done 2 Google searches. Here's me emailing as Colin. Can anybody spot the flaw in the email? And they can't. Yeah, because that's me not being sophisticated. You get people paid experts in this who know what they're doing. So it's a salient reminder to the exec and the management to keep their teams focused on the ever-present risk, because we deal with a lot of money, a lot of legal transactions, a lot of contracts. It doesn't take a lot to make a mistake and find you've sent your down payment on the land purchase to the wrong account because somebody said change the numbers and you did without thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely preying on.
We have introduced some further checks and balances in the changes we do make to our core systems around certain key information. So supplier details, bank details, anything that requires a bank change that requires another level of check before we authorize it. Whereas we have a sensible level of checking. We now have another level of, yes, ring them up and speak to the person you've always spoke to. And if they're not there, send it back. Almost.
Absolutely, yeah. That's definitely a very interesting perspective, and it's a change we probably wouldn't normally have seen. So a question from Alan is asking around, what do we do around moving services and where services like Dropbox sent through the VPN? So Mannix, in your experience with your customers, have you seen a lot of that?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to hear the feedback from the guys. So from a Dropbox perspective, because I was listening to Andreas about links. So to be frank, because Dropbox has a freemium and a consumer side of the business, it is looked at with it very, very closely from IT staff. I don't think it would be unfair to say when Dropbox links. We've always come from the user base up, so users love us, but IT have always been very wary of us. So our job of work has sort of come from the other angle, is that we had to do a lot of work to enhance our security stance, and we have to be more secure than our competitors in the marketplace for that very reason. So over the last 2 years, we have introduced Active Directory integration, both online and Azure, offline and legacy and Azure, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, password on links, restricted downloads, restricted uploads. But then we've gone a layer deeper recently into scanning. So Peter was talking about bank details. So the ability to scan for PII. And then our whole entire infrastructure, we own and maintain our own infrastructure globally, our ISO standards and certifications. So we were coming from from a user perspective, you mentioned phishing and malware attacks. We introduced a very simple thing that saved a good few businesses called version history, where you can just roll back any file or any folder up to 180 days at the click of a button. So we had one customer case where they were hit with a ransomware attack, and they contacted our support. They didn't even have to come back to their accounting and support. They didn't even have to use support, and it was just for a bit of comfort. But they just rolled back to the previous day. So we very much like the guys who bought the laptops in January. We spent and are now reaping the benefits. We spent the last 2 years highly investing in our security and our IT admin functionality, and it's paying us dividends now, because we couldn't operate in this world without it.
Sweet, and yeah, investment well spent. It's a big change before. The heart of what we're trying to achieve, but with a solution like yours, having something that actually provides that extra level is just so important, isn't it? It is so easy to get caught out. Excellent, thank you. So I guess moving on to the next question, we're looking at how has COVID-19 affected business continuity planning and perhaps more importantly testing. So I mean, I know for myself in our situation, we had 3 locations with hundreds of seats of capacity ready for that business continuity interruption, and I could use none of them. So an amazing plan that we tested repeatedly that absolutely gave me absolutely zero benefit. So I would definitely suggest in our experience, in our area, it really has made a lot of difference to our business continuity planning and our vision and our way forward. I wouldn't go as far as to say we had a proper pandemic plan. We did have a bit of a day zero plan of if the world blew up, what would we do? And it was pretty much useless, to be honest. But I do think that ability to pivot and move quickly was the bit that really moved us forward. And I think going forward, our plans will be much more around, no matter what you think, and no matter how many different ways you look at it, when something goes really wrong, no matter what your plan is, you're going to have to be able to work on the fly with it. So I think having some level of flexibility around really what it is that you're trying to achieve and what the bare minimum is to keep your business operating are probably more important than some of the KPIs that were in some of the measurement plans that we had. They were very dreamy, would have been amazing, but not in the real world. So that was kind of our experience. It's definitely focus the mind a bit. And I think as everyone else has said, having a whole host of laptops that you can deploy and move people forward with did a lot more value than paying for a room somewhere that no one could get into. So I know, Peter, could you give us a view on what your experience of this has been?
I think I've been in a sort of disaster planning and continuity planning exercise, and they're all great on paper, aren't they? Until the event happens. And I think we ran an exercise many years ago where we managed to kill half the team in a pseudo event simply by saying, well, there was a fire. What do we do next? And then finding, I'll go and get the battle box with all the phones in. Right, where is that? But it's upstairs. And right, so you go and get that box? Yep. Okay, well, you're now dead. Let's take, and so we had the same continuity plan. No one ever envisaged this situation. So it ripped up the continuity planning and moved it all to a virtual model. And it's caused a lot of rethinking in our business. But the positive outcome is that the pace at which we were able to enable that whole digitization and mobilization of our workforce meant our continuity planning now is about where you can get online, wherever that happens to be, because we've made you fully mobile now. We've made you fully mobile with your systems and services and technology. If you can get online, you can work pretty much 99% of the job. The only bit of the work we can't do is physically build houses remotely. The robots are promised, but I think we're a good decade away from seeing some practical advantages in in-house building in the UK. So I think continuity planning, it was all based on go and work from somewhere else. That's turned into, well, we have to have a kit, we have to have this, and we have to have that, have to have the other. My team, the 2-year plan to roll out Office 365, it made me smile. I spent 2 years trying to get it signed off. And it was deployed in a matter of days because everybody moved to Teams because they saw the advert, clicked on the link and got Teams because it was, and those who hadn't got Teams suddenly needed it because some of their colleagues had got 365 and had a Teams button that they were using and others weren't. So we just saw this rapid adoption. And I'm fortunate having an exec who were very prudent, pragmatic, and they saw it as to do what was necessary to keep the business going. That was the decision processing. So we rolled out Teams in a matter of weeks. We rolled out, scaling, we went from about 20 video conferencing licenses to about 100. We just put systems and services in place. We'd already moved to unified comms, that helped. We bought a whole bunch of devices, and it changed our thinking and allowed us to challenge some of the execs thinking where they were, the old school, almost process-based, got to be seen and all that sort of the logic of let's deal with, if we had a fire in the building, where would we go? Well, we'd move down to the other side. Okay, that's great. Imagine all the buildings burnt down at the same time. That'll never happen, but it just did. So let's work on the basis we're not allowed to leave the house. Now how does that affect the business on the globe? And it's really changed the thinking process around that and crisis management around that whole approach. But it did take the very big lever of you're not allowed to do that anymore to get them to think more broadly about what a continuity plan needs to be, because it was, we'll just make it work. City of your pants stuff.
Would it be fair to say that none of this is about technology? It's all about
it's all about behaviours. It's all about behaviours and thought processes. The technology is a saviour, because if without the technology, they'd never be able to even think about. We'd have shut up shop without the technology. But it was the change in the mindset that, right, you need to get the job done from wherever you're sat. Go, almost. Tell me what the cost is later. Go make it happen, because we need to. The end of the exercise is to be in business, not to be. Well, we would have been in business if. We don't want to be having that conversation. If tell me how much money you're spending, but don't worry about it. If it means the business stays afloat. If it's a nice to have, forget it. If it's essential to run, buy it. And that's been helpful, I think. But largely it was the change in mentality and the change in behaviours of, you're going to do the job from home, what do you need? I think our two challenges, obviously having resource on site building houses was problematic because it was very much restrained for a period and then it's socially distanced. And then the other challenge, we work with legal contracts. You can't just have those float through the ether. You've got to get physical documents. So we bought a bunch of printers, which is against the whole flow of people don't print. We bought a bunch of printers for the legal team, and they got a printer each at home. Now the objection is it's the size of a washing machine, these printers, so they're not terribly happy about them, but they've got a printer at home, which means they don't have to come to the office. They haven't got to take risks. And they took it on the view of, I'd rather be at home with a printer than have to come into the office and take a risk because I've got to print or not have a job because I can't do my work. So we just took a measured view, but it was continuity planning was turned on its head. All the stuff you'd imagine, all the stuff we would normally think to about the building fire, completely on its head, because it's, what if you can't use the buildings? What if you can't get to the buildings? What if it's just changed the whole thought process, which has been good.
Sorry, can I ask you, how do you view dealing with people outside your organization? So if we take house building or education, or even financial services, where you're dealing with a lot of brokers, they're not your employees. You've no control over them. You might have all the systems in the world, but they don't have the systems or the security around their systems. How do you view that?
It's for us, we have a sort of two-tier. We have this. We don't send the sort of documents we send between those parties are very confirmatory that something has happened. There doesn't tend to be a detailed document. Those remote partners, we've enabled ourselves to work with any comms platform, so we can join meetings and things, and so can they. But when it comes to physical documents, we use couriers. We pay for the courier to physically transport the document. If we have to physically send a document, we use couriers. We pay for the courier service. If we have recently implemented digital signatures where it's allowed, but in some instances you've got to have a wet signature, and we work around it in that regard. And we also have this, because of the nature of our trade, is solicitors deal with the bank on behalf of the client buying the house, and they hold on to the money in escrow. So we're very isolated from that transactional detail set. What we get is the confirmation of, I've got the money, you can have the money, we've sent the money. It's more that nature of trade between banks. So we are quite isolated from some of the risks, but we've introduced digital signatures where we're allowed, and it's wet signatures only where absolutely necessary. But it's been a challenge. I think we have be very cautious around sharing documentation that way, beyond what we would normally do, because of the nature of the transactions. We don't want to have things fall into the outside world.
Thank you.
You're making me worry now. I'm going to have to go in.
But yeah, heavily regulated industries that it's what you can do is not necessarily what you might like to do. But you need to follow the right process. So, Andreas, any views from you on that?
On the document and exchange of documents, I'll say that most of them, they were always, we exchange a lot with third parties and council and the government, because we need to do that, especially for some of our students that they're more, we need additional risk assessments, etc. This was kind of always semi-digital, which was always via, usually, I hope that is still the case with some of our emails, highly encrypted and password protected. I say that with a pinch of salt. I'm just going through all the emails that I've seen whether it's just the constant fear on the back of your head. And I think I blame Peter for that now, because he made me be a bit conscious of, does everyone do that, or is it someone that I have to be a bit more careful with? But that's how we try to address usually the issue. We didn't have a major change due to COVID on that, because we always had to operate remotely. We wouldn't easily go from, we receive some students across the whole of London. So if we're in East London, someone's from Southwest, you're not gonna get the physical document for them when we require. So that's gonna be sent via email most of the times. About the business continuity, I think that it was just, it is, I think in the early days of the COVID, I saw this lovely kind of comment that a lot of CTOs try to digital transform a company, and COVID managed to do that in one day. After a lot of years of trying to, no, you have to go digital, you have to be able to work remotely, and then suddenly COVID comes like, yes, it's okay, you can do it. So if anything, the challenge that I would say is that the current continuity, because schools and education are open, so you go back to the old habits. So that's where I find that we're currently struggling on people who want to go back to the old way of doing things, which some of them were not the best way of doing things. So
Yes, that's very true. Simon, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, we had loads of kind of I suppose assumptions really about what you can and can't do that just had to be broken overnight. So we had processes that had relied on paper for years that we've been trying to get rid of. Suddenly, people had to do them. Kind of electronically, and lo and behold, they could. They found that that happened. I think other things like I've been trying to get rid of agents taking card payments for a long time. I was told no, even though we had IVR-based methods, web-based methods of taking the card payments, no, there'll be some customers who can't do that. I insisted on it with people working from home that they couldn't see card data, so we just turned it off. No complaints, not a single one. No card payments lost. It was absolutely, worked absolutely fine. So it was brilliant for kind of testing some of those things out, really. And yeah, the danger is we kind of go back to some of those practices. I think some of those gains have had now. I don't think we'll go back, but there's still a view, and I think it's probably the right view, that basically we're an office-based business for a lot of what we do. So optimally, we will be in the office. So I think it's understanding what you use the office for, where it benefits you and where it doesn't. Because for an awful lot of what we've been doing, in IT, we're more productive actually, and I was very much, you come into the office, you can work from home occasionally, sometimes. So everyone's working from home now. We monitor the output. The output's gone up. Everyone appreciates the flexibility. Myself, I'll kind of I'll have my tea and then I'll do the evening shift. It's just because that works for me. It's kind of work-life balance. Some days of the week. It's people build it around. What they need. I think the challenge has been really for people who've maybe had young kids in lockdown, when the kids were there and they were having to manage all of those things. I didn't have that. Some people didn't have ideal working environments. As we move into second lockdown, we've really got to think about those things. So now we're going out and we're doing an audit of what facilities do people have at home. Do you need a more comfortable chair? Do you need 2 monitors like you've got at work? What do we need to do there? So we're preparing. Well, we're already in a position where the great majority of people now are back working from home as requested, and we need to make sure that's sustainable, because realistically, the next 6 months that will be what everybody's doing.
Yeah, it's a hugely important part of learning from what happened the first time. Although we never really feel like we came out of it properly, but as we dive straight back in, I think it's going to become more and more prevalent that we look into it. We are rapidly running out of time, so I would just like to talk about that human side a bit, because I think it's something that we really can't avoid. I think that we do so at our peril. So one of the questions looking at is how we've managed to maintain momentum from working from home, and what the human factors involved with that. And I know we've done a lot around mental health awareness. A lot of our sick leave now is mental health based, because people are just really struggling at home. So I don't know, Alex, do you want to talk anything about that? How you see that?
Yeah, and sorry, I think the question came in as well. Just in case we might get to that as well. Yeah, what we're seeing, so where Dropbox does well is when loads of different teams and loads of different companies all have to collaborate together at the same time. So it's easy to have your conversation around your employees and your unit, but when you're working on projects that have multiple different people from multiple different organizations on multiple different softwares, with big files and large files, and some people have really strong security and people have really lax security. That's where we sit in the middle. So what we're finding internally in Dropbox, I'm finding a lot like people are going right back into their teams. So they're working very well within their own team, but I wouldn't be speaking to my German colleagues. I haven't spoken to them in 6 months. I haven't really dealt with the States at all, besides getting top-down messages. So I find that quite interesting, that we're actually getting our worlds are shrinking a little bit. While they're expanding online and they're expanding in Slack and Zoom, the human element of it is shrinking a little bit. That's what we find internally. How then you mean the creative side of the business? Like, businesses need to create. Like, we've been through the shock and the logistics and the lockdown phase. It's, businesses have to grow, economies have to grow, and we do that by talking to other people and sharing ideas. And while forums like this are great, what's top of mind for us now is how do we do that into the future, when we can't go to conferences and the like. So again, for us, we have to absolutely provide a secure place to allow that to happen, and security and trust are absolutely top of mind. But we are very much looking at the human element as opposed to the technology element.
Absolutely. So just before we jump, we've got one question that's come in. I think we should definitely answer. Is there anybody got any other views they wanted to share briefly just before we jump onto that?
I think the other challenge, I think what we've seen with going, everybody working is a switch almost to task-driven engagement. Everyone's driving the things to be done, and that's the dialogue we're having. We're no longer having did you see the football? What about and all the social discourse that happens in the office is disappearing. And one of the things we're now very keen on, we have taken a positive approach to mental health and managing and providing services to keep people, give people the option if needed to get assistance. But we're also looking at how do we introduce non-task related dialogue across groups of people, across groups of the audience, and having almost a community call approach of, you can jump on the call and have a chit chat and see who's there, and it's almost that virtual coffee pot type dialogue. We're trialing those out in various ways, and we're just trying to see which way of that works best to enable people to have that inconsequential conversation as much as they're having where's my 6 things on the list? Have you done an X? Yeah. I want that back by Tuesday. And balancing that, because we have got some teams, IT, my team they could do the whole job from the beach if they get a 4G signal. We don't physically have to turn anything off and on anymore, with the exception of a print server in Scotland. But we have to measure it because the rest of the business aren't in that same comfortable spot. So we're having to use our experience. Hey, here's how you can work around that. And here's how to have a community call. We've provided services that here's how you can use this to get everybody talking about. Let's run a quiz. Let's run events that are non-work related in the work 9 to 5 to allow that discourse, and that's going to help people keep the momentum going because they can focus on the tasks and they're not losing everything by not being in the office. Which is the challenge we're having is dealing with some of the older leadership who see a command and control and task orientation, and we've got to lift that because that's necessary to drive the business and be profitable and grow and everything. We've also got to have the soft conversation that tells you actually someone's struggling, which you'd spot in a second in the office because they just wouldn't be themselves. You can't see it online because 99% of the time you don't see them. So we're having to have that. We're wanting to have the open dialogue that allows us to spot someone's not in the right space. Can we help as much as we are allowing them to drive the traction and drive the transactions?
Hugely important, and just so difficult to do. I think it's just experimentation, isn't it, to try and see how you can try and build that up. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what works for some people doesn't work for others. Just giving many different avenues, I think.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, it's a very interesting conversation. I think there's one quick question we've got was, as the COVID outbreak, while affected the whole of your stack, also changed your approach to identity management in relation to working across multiple SaaS solutions. Thanks, John, for that. I mean, from my perspective, briefly, it hasn't changed perspective. It's probably just speeded it up a little bit and put it higher up on the priority list. Does anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I think for us, we kind of had a similar thing of priorities. So we were looking at single login. and we'd chosen a vendor, but that's suddenly shot up the priority list. I think though the thin client tech that we've got has helped quite a lot, because in effect you can still apply the same kind of controls and firewall controls that we could in the office. So it's gone up the priority list, but we're still finding ways to secure that access.
Excellent. Andreas, anything from you? Or?
No, just exactly the same as you said, Graham. It didn't really change the priorities, and especially as most of the SaaS that we had was already quite secure and connected, so nothing major on this area.
Excellent. Okay, Mannix, any final comments from yourself?
No, just thanks to everybody on the call, and thank you to all the panel. I really enjoyed that. It's interesting to get a bit of diversity. It's great not to just talk about sales pipeline for half an hour. So I really I really enjoyed that. But it's interesting to see the challenges, and the thing that comes across from me is that this thing has had distinct phases. Phase one was all about logistics, action, get it working. I think everybody globally rose to the challenge. I think we can all be very proud of that. For our teams, there's a second phase. I won't say wave because that has other connotations, but it's once that's peaked, then how do we figure out where we go from here? And what's becoming increasingly apparent to us is that the human element is you absolutely have to have your security stance and your proper infrastructure. But the human side of it is beginning to bubble to the surface, and it's a bit trickier. It's not as linear to solve.
No, much trickier to resolve, isn't it? Definitely, it's not as easy as just rolling out some new solution or giving someone a laptop and making sure the firewall works. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening and for participating today. Thanks, Andreas, Mannix, Simon, and Peter. I've really enjoyed it. I've had fun, and talk to you all again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.